Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Basil Considine. I am here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we are going to talk about writing about contemporary leadership theories. This is a webinar in our series EdD in Progress, a number of webinars that specifically target various assignments and dissertation-related milestones and tasks for the Doctor of Education program here at ACU. If you're joining from another program, happy to have you. But our focus here will be on writing about leadership theories and a specific assignment in the EdD program. A little bit about us at the Writing Center. We work with students at any place in the process. So whether you're in your coursework right now, just starting out, or you are actually already dissertating and you're looking at how to work on and write about part of your literature review, we're happy to have you here. And you are more than welcome to visit us in webinars like this and to make appointments for feedback. Normally, students will make what we call asynchronous appointments, which is to say, not in real time. You schedule an appointment. By the time that appointment slot comes around, you go ahead and upload a copy of your paper, and then within 24 hours, we will send you feedback. So for example, if you had a 8 p.m. appointment with me tonight, you would have until 8 p.m. to upload your paper. And then by the time we got to 8 o'clock tomorrow, you'd have an email from me with feedback. Sometimes it's faster, but for example, if you had a 7 o'clock appointment with me right now, I'm not going to be responding to your feedback. Sorry, I'm not going to be giving you feedback until I'm done with this webinar. So it does not hurt at all to upload your paper early. Just make sure that you give us what you want us to comment on. So for a lot of students, that will be something closer to the time. But if you're working well ahead and you happen to have your draft prepped, 3 days before, just go ahead and upload it. Not a problem at all. We also do real-time or phone or Zoom appointments by request. Now that is by request, availability pending. So if you were to ask us in week 7, the day that all the papers are due, that's not the best time to ask for that. Early in the semester, sure, we're happy to accommodate it as we're able. Webinars such as this and a whole lot of other resources are available through the Online Writing Center website. And with that, let's just talk briefly about some of the things that are coming up that might be of interest to you. Now, if you are in the educational leadership program at ACU, you've been doing a lot of short papers up to this point, but we are building towards a number of assignments where you start having to write a great deal and to take a lot of different pieces of literature and tell us what these mean together, what they mean when applied to something. And we'll talk about applying leadership theories specifically to an assignment in a few minutes. But if you are at that stage and you're getting feedback saying, tell me why this matters or synthesis needed, I strongly recommend coming to our Beyond Summary, adding analysis and synthesis to your writing webinar, which is going to be on Tuesday, February 9th. Tuesday, February 9th at 6 p.m. We have a recording of that's already available on the website. So if you're getting that comment now, you don't have to wait a couple weeks. You could watch that webinar this evening. And with that, let us proceed to our main subject matter today. So our primary objectives today: to understand how to write about leadership theories in APA style, how to cite case studies, whether they're published or unpublished, in APA style, and then understand how to quickly and efficiently meet the expectations for the contemporary leadership theories assignment in Leadership 721. And if you are in Leadership 721 right now, this is an assignment that you've probably read about this week. If not, it is due on Monday, so don't wait too long to read about it. All right, so let's talk about leadership theories in general in APA style. There is a basic formula that we want to follow in most cases, which is much like any other APA citation. We want to know who wrote it, when was it published, and what the key detail about it is for this discussion, which is what is that theory about? So you'll find that most theories get referred to in a very business-like, to the point fashion, like Smith's 2018 theory of church volunteer leadership. And this is partly because people usually don't start with the, oh, I have a catchy name for this theory. Usually they just start and they're writing about the thing that interests them. Oh, well, we're talking about leadership and church volunteers. And so it just becomes, well, Smith's 2018 theory of church volunteer leadership. Sometimes if a theory becomes very popular, if it gets a lot of traction, other people will coin a name for it, or a name will be coined to distinguish it from something similar, or they will develop a model that is used to give the name, or a instrument, a survey instrument, a test of some sort that then ends up giving the name to the theory retroactively. Now, it's important to keep in mind the specific version of a theory that you're looking at, because these often evolve over time. Sometimes the evolution is by the original author or authors, and they're refining it to account for new data or to apply to a different situation. Or it may be someone else who is adapting and extending it to another context. This is why we don't want to just say, oh, the theory of church volunteer leadership. Well, whose theory, which version, when? Theories can and do evolve over time and across different publications. Now, you'll actually be reading about some of these in a moment, where certain ideas have changed over the time. And in fact, certain theories of leadership have gone out of fashion. In the 19th century, there was a very popular idea called the great man theory of leadership. And yes, it was mostly about men. And it had this idea that leaders are bred and not trained. And so, well, if you didn't have those characteristics, sorry, can't be a leader if you just don't have what it takes. And I think that you'll agree with me that the general thrust of leadership theory in the last century has been more about, wait, there are certain things that you can and should encourage. But to what extent a theory says that? Is it all nurture, or is there some nature in there? That's going to depend on the exact theory, so please be specific. If you just joined us, please let me know where you are joining us from geographically and where you are in the program. So if you're taking Leadership 721 right now, awesome, happy to have you here. And if you let us know, that'll help me customize the examples around that. If we have more people who are beyond and are at the dissertating stage, then I might broaden some of the examples a little bit. And I do encourage questions as we go along. If you have a question that you don't want to ask in the general chat room, you can always send me a private message just by selecting my name, Basil Constein, from the drop down in the chat. And then you can ask the question without having to have your name in front of everyone, as you please. Now, there are some cases where people go back to basics on that, where they go to an earlier version of the theory because there's something that the author proposed, but then they didn't test. And you're like, but wait, what if we tried this with a different sample? Or they said it was too expensive to do that. Well, like working from home, which up until about a year ago, most companies were not terribly in favor of, and now they are more so than they used to be. There are things that may change. Uh, I recall one theory where the author said, well, the only way to do this is to test thousands of people, and that would just be impossible. Now, they were talking in a period of time where phone calls cost money and were measured by the minute. And now we have online surveys. So it may be possible to do something now that was not when the theory was originally published. Or you might have something where someone is developing the theory by applying it to a new case or tweaking some of what it says about how things work. Like Kurana 2006 extended this theory by applying it to the potency of charismatic authority. And I see we have someone who's joining us from the, excuse me, from the counseling program. This is something that happens all the time in various counseling and theories of therapy, where you see, but in this specific case, this thing works well. So let's modify the theory according to that. So here's some examples of how you might be writing about a theory in APA style. Conger and Kanungo's 1987 Behavioral Theory of Charismatic Leadership emphasizes the importance of charisma in effective leadership within an organization. Now, you might be asking, wait, why is that in present tense? Because if you've had an appointment with me, you've probably gotten feedback saying, oh, refer to this in past tense. Well, we refer to things published at a specific time in past tense. But if you're talking about what that version of the theory says, or how it applies to something, that's talking about ongoing, a present thing, which is why when we're talking about the theory specifically, we use emphasizes, present tense here. But as you'll see in the second example, if we're talking about what the author said, what they wrote, what they published, then we'd have Conger and Kanungo 1987 stated that charisma is an important component in effective organizational leadership. Now, if we want the focus to be on the ideas rather than the theory in particular, or the authors, then we'd have something like the third example. Charisma is an important characteristic of effective organizational leadership. Conger and Kanungo 1987. So that if we're talking about, say, the essential characteristics of leadership or the essential characteristics in different theories, then yeah, this is putting the emphasis on charisma rather than on the finders or the people who argue that that was the case. And this last example is talking more about how you read something through the lens of a theory, such as, according to the behavioral theory of charismatic leadership, actions that alienate followers will undermine leaders' success in the long term. Conger and Kanungo, 1987. And each of these can come up in the assignment that we're going to be discussing. A couple more examples before we dive in there. So it's important to keep track. Are you just talking about a specific theory or model of leadership versus a general family of theories? This is the difference between, say, Smith's 2018 in Theory of Leadership Initiative and theories of leadership initiative in general. Now, when you are writing out the name of a theory, something that will often cause confusion is that in APA style, we don't actually capitalize theory names or model names as proper nouns. Why? Well, Smith's 2018 theory of leadership, Considine's 2020 theory of leadership, that in that case, theory of leadership is being used generally to describe things. Now, it's something where if you are working in a particular context, well, you might be using more than one theory of leadership. Another thing to keep in mind, the inverse of this, is that in APA style, while we don't capitalize the names of theories or models, because they're theories, they may not necessarily have been tested or validated in great detail. If it's a survey instrument that is part of that name, like a questionnaire that you use, that is always capitalized as a proper noun. And so if that happens to be part of the theory name, then that does get capitalized. So for example, the leader's behavior description questionnaire assesses leadership according to, and then whatever criteria it tracks. Or Oates' 2010 leadership expert questionnaire categorizes. Now, something to keep in mind in that bullet about the LBDQ, this is actually a questionnaire that was developed first back in the 1940s, and it's been developed and extended and expanded over the years, so they're now on version 12. So it is still the leader's behavior description questionnaire. But if you're referring to it, let us know which version you're referring to, which is why we have the LBDQ IXII, which means LBDQ 12. And you'll find that some people number their theories or their questionnaire versions using Roman numerals and some using the Arabic numerals. So go with whatever the authors are using. And so while a theory or its related questionnaire may have been originally developed a long time ago, if it's still in current usage, it's probably being updated. If you have taken the StrengthsFinder personality test, you'll know that we are on StrengthsFinder 2.0. I understand that there's a 3.0 in the works there. And, as you update as is important and relevant. Sometimes there's an argument made to use a older version of the questionnaire because it was developed for a context that more closely matches what you're doing. We see this all the time in the medical fields. So if you're a nursing student and you're working on a project where you are surveying people, you might say, well, we're using version 6 because it includes this section that was cut. But here's what the author said, why they wrote that in the original place, and that matches our circumstances, so we're using that. So long as there's a clear rationale, no problem there. So let's talk about case studies. And this comes up in many different classes because a case study is a very valuable thing for understanding ideas, to put it into practice by looking at a scenario. So you'll see this in our business classes, you'll see it in our psychology classes, you'll see it in leadership classes, you'll see it in nursing classes. As let's look at a scenario and according to this theory, what should we do? Or what are the pros and cons of using this approach to try and solve the issues here? What are the things that people should be concerned about? Or how do we understand what happened? So let's distinguish here between published and unpublished case studies. Now, published in the APA sense means something that other people can get access to relatively easily. There might be money involved to purchase a copy or get access to that journal. You might have to log into a website, but something that has been written down in some sort of form and that can be accessed by the public versus unpublished, like a situation in your own workplace or a scenario that you remember coming up at your work, or something that is described in a course assignment, but not otherwise available and accessible. For example, there is an article, Moya et al. 2020, that describes what happened in this terrible earthquake in Indonesia a couple years ago. And so you might introduce discussing that as a case study of the 2018 Sulawesi, Indonesia earthquake, Moya et al. 2020, provides useful lessons for future leaders. Now, does the source need to say, oh, this is a case study? No. But I've told the reader, I am treating something that's described in that source as a case study. Now, you may also be working with a book of case studies or other published ones where these are presented to illustrate different theories or to practice your understanding of different theories. And Leah Nordhaus's book is a great example of that. So in this case, I am citing the second edition, the 2019 one. So Leah Nordhaus 2019 described a case about stakeholder recruitment in a medium-sized school district. Now, you don't have to include the page number there, but it's helpful because they've got a lot of case studies about education. And if someone wants to find the specific one I'm talking about, well, giving the page number when I first introduce it, then there's no question about which one I'm talking about. Where in the Jefferson School District case study, Leah Nordhaus 2019, there's a significant conflict between blah, blah, blah. Now, there's nothing wrong with it, this last one or the one before. It's just a question of where we want the emphasis to be. In the Leah Nordhaus 2019 described, the focus is more on the authors. In the next one, this is saying is saying, okay, here's the context, but we're focusing on that conflict. There's a significant conflict between whatever group and this other group. Now, if you're writing about an unpublished case study, which will happen in, again, many of the programs here at ACU where you're asked to describe a case study that you are familiar with, you can use language like a recent situation in my local school district provides a useful case study on. And that works if you've previously introduced that local school district. If you have, say, in the previous paragraph, you've explained, I work at this school district as this, and here are the things that are going on. If you've done that, then we know exactly what your local school district is. If this is the first time you've mentioned your local school district, then this is not ideal because we don't know, well, what is local to you? And I know that we have a couple people joining us from Houston today. Well, you know, uh, are we talking Houston proper? Are we going out to like Pearland? If someone asks me where I'm from and I say, oh yeah, I'm from Boston, I'm usually saying that because I'm fairly sure they can pick out Boston on a map. But if it's someone who tells me, oh yeah, I'm from Cambridge, then I'd say, okay, well, I was born in Newton, grew up in Brookline, whatever the case may be, because I see, oh, you understand the general context. Let me give you some more specific details. And a lot of those specific details, when you're describing an unpublished case study, are things that help make sense of why you are talking about the things that you do. For example, a recent situation in a mid-sized suburban Texas school district provides a useful case study illustrating these things. Mid-sized. That gives a sense of some of the challenges and polities involved. That would be very different if this was a small rural school district in, say, the Western Panhandle of Texas. So, yeah, give us some context to help understand what's going on. Sometimes things may apply more generally, but the more we understand, this relates or doesn't relate to what we're trying to do, the easier we will be able to follow and see how things are relevant. You might also be describing something along the lines of, the problems facing Dr. Smith's leadership team are a useful case for understanding the different benefits of this leadership theory and that leadership theory. And if you're in just starting the leadership program, you're going to be doing just that kind of write-up in your later coursework. At this point, let's turn the page to looking at the specific assignment in Leadership 721. So if you're in this course, this is the assignment that is due on Monday. If you're not in this course yet, don't worry. You can always come back to this on video and revisit it if you want to remind yourself about it. But I think the general principles will be applicable whatever program you're doing. All right, so this is an assignment that asks you to do a couple pieces of selection and research. Select one leadership theory from the 7 included for this week. Using the reference list from the chapter and your own research, identify at least 2 additional scholarly journal articles that focus on that leadership theory. Select articles from within the last 7 years. You're encouraged to look for articles that relate to your industry or sector, e.g., education, church ministries, nonprofit organizations. So this is one of those cases where you want to tell us, what is your background? What are you working in? And probably to have a rationalization and statement. I selected this theory because XYZ is a common problem in my 10 years of professional experience in higher education, for example. All right, let's look at some of the other specifics here. All right, so we need to review the textbook, the Hickman and textbook, and select 2 articles and write a paper of 2 to 3 pages. Okay, so I always want to start with the length because that gives me an idea of how much detail to go into. Now, this is 2 to 3 pages of body text, roughly 500 to 750 words. That's not a lot of space. So it means we want to be very to the point, to answer exactly what the assignment's instructions ask us to do, and then probably we'll be done. So that is empowering in the sense that we know we don't have to worry about adding lots of other discussions, but it is also a caution that we want to make sure that we follow these instructions in detail first, so that we don't end up writing extra pages that then have to be cut or trimmed. All right, so let's see what we have to do here. Need to summarize the theory. Okay, that shouldn't be too much of a problem. Discuss the development of the theory in terms of the theory's emergence and what opportunities exist. Okay, great. And discuss how the theory might be used to benefit organizations in our sector. Okay, great. How do you see the theory? How do you see how it could be applied? How could further research on this theory benefit organizations in the industry or sector? Great. Now, at this point, I would like to ask those who are in the room if you might tell me a little bit about your context. If you are, for example, working in public school, private school, university, a non-education in industry or sector, let me know, and that will help me shape the examples in these next couple things. So let me know where you're working or where do you want to work. There's some additional instructions here. Okay, we need to cite and provide references for the readings. Okay, yeah, that's normal for AP style. Have an APA formatted reference page for all in-text citations. Yep. There is a rule in APA style where every source that you cite must be in your reference list. And every source that is in your reference list must be cited in the body of your paper. And by cite, I should clarify, we mean for published sources. So if it's, for example, an interview you did with someone and it hasn't been published in a journal somewhere, well, that counts as not published. So it's only the published sources that you cite that would be in the reference list and vice versa. All right, and a general note about quality of writing following the EdD program, Writing from Breck. All right, let's look at the rubric specific for this assignment and see what's going on here. Okay, demonstration of understanding and application of the readings. Aha! So remember when I said earlier that synthesis is very important? When it says demonstration of understanding and application, the application is, that instruction is saying, I want synthesis of the theory. To take the theory and don't just summarize it, but to apply it to a context. Say, okay, this is important here because of reasons. And if you do that synthesis about your own context, you will be giving evidence of insight into the selected leadership theory. So by adding that application, that synthesis, you'll be taking care of the third part of that first item. All right, includes all 3 required sections. All right, follows all instructions. Okay. Now you'll notice that includes all 3 required sections and follows all instructions. That's 20% of the grade. So we want to make sure we do that. Applies leadership theory to organizations in a specific industry or sector. Okay, great. Stick within the length requirements and have all the stuff that APA style should. Awesome. And basic writing standards. Okay, so those last 2, that's 40% of the grade. So let's not turn any 6-page papers here. We want this to be right around right at the target length. And then 2 additional credible sources that are relatively recent. In this case, it's saying the last 7 years as the cutoff here. Okay. So if you have been to one of my other EdD in Progress webinars, you know what's going to happen next. We're going to take the APA course paper template, and then we're going to use this to build an outline for the paper. Because as I said, we don't have that much space, only 2.5 to 3 pages of body content. So we want to make sure we do everything that we have to first, and then see, is that about right? Or do we have space to where we want to put in some more detail? If you just joined us, we are about to dive in depth for this assignment for the Leadership 721 Contemporary Issues in Organizational Leadership class. So if you joined us late and you want to catch the rest, don't worry, we'll be posting the recording to the website later this evening. But this is the meat and potatoes, or the tempeh, if you're vegetarian, of our webinar today. All right, so I am going to change my screen sharing here. I am going to share a Microsoft Word document that you should now be seeing. And what this is a blank copy of our APA course paper template. And please let me know in the chat window that you can see this, because we always want to make sure that the screen sharing goes right. So let me know if you can see my screen in Microsoft Word right now. Great, thank you. So we are going to go ahead and we are going to start by filling in the normal details. We want to make sure that we are starting from a point of having everything that we need. So, all right, let's go ahead and we're going to start. And I'm just going to straight up copy and paste the instructions here. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start deleting anything that's not telling me what to do. So this write a paper of 2 to 3 pages. Okay, great. Don't need that. Here, the important thing is identify at least 2, and that is repeated here. So I'm like, okay, I don't need that. And I can take this out. And now I have kind of a list of things to get here. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to pick an example here. And I see we have someone who said that they work for a local government entity. Great. Local government can be a number of things, especially if you're in a smaller town or more rural area. So we'll delve into that in a moment. So the title of this assignment, I sometimes have students writing in and asking, is this a good title for this? And I say, the best title is one that is informative, accurate, precise, and reasonably concise. So if it happens that we are doing the a assignment on, in this case, contemporary leadership theories, then let's start from the point of clearly being about contemporary leadership theories. All right. And that's going to be my placeholder title here. I might make that more specific, but it's now accurate to the assignment, and I can go ahead and fill in these things. You can go ahead and do those on your own later. Just make sure you do it before you submit this. And then if you have your copy of the textbook here, let's talk about how to cite that, because the textbook being referred to here, this is actually a book of, it's an edited book, which means that each chapter is written by a different author or set of authors. So that means that we're not going to be citing the book as a whole. We're going to be citing whichever specific chapter we decide to discuss, or to pull the theory a description from. So in this case, does anyone have a theory that they'd especially like us to be talking about? If so, let me know in the chat window. I'm going to say, let's go with, for now, Swadek and McIntosh's theory of social responsibility. This is described in chapter 42 of that very long textbook. Waddick and McIntosh, the theory of leadership, corporate responsibility and leadership. So I'm going to go here and say, all right, so this is actually giving me a kind of a list of things to start with. So we'll make these bullets here. All right, so you want to stick within the list that is given to you for this week's reading. In my case, since this is just an example here, we're going to go with Waddick and McIntosh. All right. So I know that I'm going to have to tell the reader about the theory that I've chosen. I need to identify some supporting journal articles. Great. But before we go that, remember when I said that everything that you cite should be listed in your reference list if it's a published source? Well, Waddick and McIntosh, I've already included a citation there. So the easiest way to make sure you have all your references cited and vice versa is every time you cite something, check and make sure that it is in your reference list. So I'm going to go ahead and add that now. Let's see, this is Sandra Waddick, and that is Malcolm McIntosh. And this was published in 2016. Let's see. Let me go grab the rest of the information here. Now, if you are looking at the course syllabus, and we're going to, let me briefly share that. There's an important detail to keep in mind here. You should be seeing my web browser here. If you're looking at the course syllabus here, we've got a lot of details here that are helpful to keep in mind, but it's also helpful to know that you want to make sure that you are meeting the present standards here. So here is the edited volume that we are looking at here, Hickman 2016, but we're not looking at the book as a whole. We are looking at the chapter within it. So right here, this information is telling you everything you need to go purchase the book. It is a citation in APA 6th edition for the book as a whole. We are using APA 7th edition now, and we are citing a chapter within the book. So what you'll see in the reference list will be slightly different than that because we are having an extra layer of specificity. So back to Microsoft Word. And this is going to be a specific book chapter. And it is business as usual, corporate responsibility in a 2.0 world. And what's it in? It's in the book. Now, if you remember what was in the syllabus, you might say, but wait, that had Thousands Oak, California. And that is the information, the city and state where the publisher is located. But that is information that you only had to include in APA 6th edition. In APA 7th edition, recognizing that publishing is a lot more global than it used to be, we no longer include the city and state information. So I've got my first reference here. And as I eventually find the different sources that I'll be citing for the additional scholarly, the additional scholarly journal articles, I'll go ahead and I will add those here. In fact, let me take a moment just to go ahead and grab something. If you're wondering how you might find another source, well, the answer is we want to go to the ACU online library, and let's do that right now. And you can go ahead and start with a search here. When you're doing this for your own assignment, you want to go into a little bit more detail than I am right now. I am going to be grabbing these as illustrative examples. So I look at this and I go ahead and I read this article and say, yes, this is exactly what I want to be doing, to be using. This is going to be one of my sources. I can go ahead and use the cite button. And it has different time savers for different style systems. It's not always perfect, but it saves a lot of time. And looking at this, this looks pretty accurate here. We've got all the right capitalization and stuff. Awesome. So just select that, copy and paste that, and I'm going to add that to my Word document. And I'll come back and I'll look for the next source here. And let's just say that for our case, we looked at these things and said, okay, great. The next article that develops this well for our case here is going to be number 6 here. So again, I'm going to use the cite button here because it saves me a lot of time for typing this up manually. And I look and say, okay, APA style. All right, so this is mostly there. These are all filled in, some by hand, some by algorithm. And so I look at this and I say, okay, well, that's not in sentence case. I'll need to change that. And this code here doesn't belong, but that's going to be really easy to change. The only thing that I'm really concerned about is that I'm missing the ending page. It seems to only have one page number here. So before I just go ahead and paste this in and call it a day, I'm going to go ahead and double check and see, is this a article where, is this an article where it has a number, and so that's not actually a page number? And so let's go to the PDF full text here and take a peek, because it could be a data entry error. It could be that this is actually article 447 for the journal. So we want to find that out. And I recommend looking at the PDF version because those tend to have the clearest page numbers. And we see that this is uniquely paginated. It has its own page 1 to 16. So this 447 is the article number. Great. So it turns out it wasn't missing the page information because it has that electronic article. It's a digitally native article. That is how it's supposed to be referred to. Sometimes they'll have like an E or an A in front of it, but if it's just a number, then it's just the number. All right, let's head back to the Word document here, and we'll add that. Now, one of the things that's helpful to know, if you come up with a case where there is an article number that's not so clearly identified, make a note about that for yourself, like write on a Post-it note. So in case you get a question from a professor saying, hey, this looks like you missed this, you can respond, oh, that's the article number, see here, without having to go look that up or thinking that you made the mistake. Now we had an excellent question about how to add this longer dash in the page range. So this is something where it'll be slightly different based on whether you're using a PC, running Windows, or a Macintosh computer. If you're on a Mac, just hit Option hyphen, and that will give you this N dash, the N dash being dash of this length. If you're on a Windows computer, I believe the shortcut, if you have a full-size keyboard, is control and then the minus sign that's on the number pad. And if you're on a laptop, it kind of depends a little bit. So if you are at a laptop and that doesn't work for you, let me know and I can answer that later. But in the meantime, I have this reference. I'm going to go ahead and update. I need to change this to sentence case. And there is actually a shortcut here that will let me quickly change that to lowercase. Awesome. So I've got my 3 references. I want to get all my points from the rubric here. So that's why I'm being so diligent about making sure I add these first. And then for when I cite these in the text, I know that this is going to be Kim and Thapa 2018. And this is going to be Haved et al. 2020, because we have 4 authors here, and the rule in APA 7 is if you have 3 or more authors, you automatically go to first author et al. When you're citing it. So Kim and Thapa 2018 and Haved et al. 2020. All right, well, let's go ahead and head on up to the outline here. So 2 articles. All right, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just add that information right now. So now I have it all handy and ready to use. And I know I have to work this into discussion. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, these are things I need to put in here, but really it's going to come up in the context of the theory because this says this is the introduction. Oh, remember when the rubric said you need to have all 3 sections that are marked? So the first one is going to be the introduction. And then this is going to be the second, this is the third. And so knowing that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to add headings in right now. So this one is going to be, okay, discuss how this theory might be used to benefit organizations in the same industry. Okay, so we had a local government earlier that we picked as our context here. If the person who volunteered that is willing to let me know a little bit more specific, like local government is in the service side of it, judicial, something like that, so we can ground this a little bit. For now, I'm just going to call it application to local government context because, while that's not a very exciting way, it is accurate. And I'm going to give this an APA level 1 heading, which you saw just made it centered and bolded. And because I know I also need to have another heading to show that I've got a section on this. So history and development of, in this case, I am writing about now, if I just had this heading here, it's not that it would be inaccurate per se, but it's not very precise because history and development of the theory of leadership and corporate responsibility, that does make it sound like we have just one theory, like one theory to rule them all and in darkness bind them all. And in fact, I'm being more specific. I'm talking about Waddick and Macintoshes. So, okay, now that's starting to look a little bit long. It's more than 1 line, so I'm going to change this to evolution of Waddick and Macintosh's theory of leadership and corporate responsibility. Okay, great. That is accurate. And I'm not going to put in an introduction heading because if it's the first part of the paper, we know it's the introduction. And also there's an APA rule that says don't have a heading called introduction because it's considered redundant. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and look at what am I supposed to be doing again? Well, let's take a peek at those slides. So the assignment is select one leadership theory from the 7 included for this week, identify 2 additional theories, and then summarize it, discuss. Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to just start writing here. I have this summarize the theory, okay. And I can just go ahead and grab this text I had here and start with that. Oops. There we go. Waddick and McIntosh's theory of leadership and corporate responsibility states that, and remember, we're talking about the theory, so that's why it's in present tense here. I can go and fill in the details about this. And then this theory was applied. Now, do you need to have all of this information when you're starting? No, not at all. It's often helpful to just start doing this so you have an idea of what elements you need to have, and then think about, okay, what exactly you're going to do with this? How exactly which details are most important to you? Let's go to the next part of the outline. Okay, discuss the development of theory in terms of its emergence and what opportunities exist. All right, so we know from the rubric this is going to be about a page. So we're going to need to have development of theory. That'll be our first paragraph. Who originally developed it? Has it changed? That some of these theories have been around for a long time. And so there are many different versions, as we saw on the slide, where it was evolving from a questionnaire that had now moved to version 12. Wow, which version are we using here? And okay, development of the theory, when was it developed? How has it changed? What is it used for? And next on this list are the opportunities for greater understanding. And this is probably going to be related to your local context. So if this theory that we're discussing here happens to be talking about this corporate responsibility being an integral part of leadership, okay, well, does that apply just for a for-profit corporation, or does it also work as a useful model for, say, higher education leadership or local government? So in this part, I might go ahead and start talking about how useful for-profit and nonprofit contexts. And moving towards stating, okay, this is why it makes sense to use this in our local context. Now, you'll see here that this is only worked out to 2 main bullets, one on development of theory and one for the opportunities for greater understanding. And each of these would be developed with one of these being about a sentence. So this would become one paragraph, and this would become one paragraph, which if you're writing paragraphs of 5 to 7 sentences, that will give us the one page that the rubric says we should approximately have for this section. Great. Well, it said we should be writing about one page. We have a list of stuff that should take us about one page. On to the next thing. All right, so how this theory might be used to benefit this. So this is one where you can say, all right, well, this is actually, if we do one paragraph on this and one paragraph on this part, again, that's going to more or less give us the one page we want. So, all right. And so that I don't confuse this and think that this bullet item is supposed to be one page by itself, I'm just going to cross that out. All right, now this is the point where we need to name the local context. And what's the need in the local context? If everything is going great, then that doesn't mean you can't apply it, but that there's probably something that you're expecting to change, like, oh, we're having COVID budget cuts, or someone's getting ready to retire, or we told people we would reach a decision on this by 2021, and hey, it's 2021 now. So whatever it should be, we want to describe the local context, the need, aid, and why this theory is more suitable than some others. So for example, if you are in the leadership program and you're in 721 right now, I believe you've done a case study in a previous class where we were looking at a situation and where there are numerous stakeholders they're trying to please. And that stakeholder, that may be very different in one context than another. If you have a small town that is, for example, has a really avid football culture, this may be very different than a small town where they're like, oh, football. Oh, I think there's a team. Not really sure, as opposed to the whole town shows up and represents and is invested in this and has been for decades and decades. So we are just explaining why this theory is good here and what the insights are. Now, those insights are going to be here. This is going to include application now, what future research could yield. Here's another example. Let's say we are dealing with a situation that's come up in local government in Sitka, Alaska. This is an island in the Aleutian chain. So you have to take a long ferry after a very, very, very long drive of more than 1,000 miles from Seattle to get to that ferry. Or you have to take a flight that does not run very often to get to Sitka. So you might say, well, okay, this theory suggests this, but it hasn't actually been evaluated in this kind of super isolated context. So some additional information would be helpful because we don't know if it's going to work as well. Or, this was done in a place where there was more of a cultural or ethnic or racial monoculture, and saying, well, we're not sure if it would work in a diverse environment or if there are things that should be done differently. And you don't need to have a ton of those because, again, all of this is supposed to be no more than a page. So just having a couple of these listed here and you'll be good. We are at time now, so I think this is a natural place to pause. We have done everything that was on my list for this webinar. If you joined us late and you'd like to make sure you get a copy of the recording, just go ahead and type your email address in the chat window. If you RSVP'd for the webinar, you should already be on our list, but if you're not sure or you didn't and you'd still like to get a copy of the recording and slide deck, just type me a message with your email address and I'll make sure that that goes out to you. So thank you for attending. Good luck with the assignment and please feel free to visit the Writing Center for help or any questions. Have a good evening.